So welcome everybody to the New Harmony Gallery of Contemporary Art. If you don't know me, my name is Audra Verona Lambert and I serve as the curator here. It's wonderful to be joined today by our three esteemed panelists, and I will be introducing them shortly. I just want to start off today by saying a huge thank you to the Landmark Columbus Foundation. We have more than one staff member here today, so thanks for being present. Thank you to the University of Southern Indiana for their support of our programs, and also to the Ephraimson Family Fund for making events like today's program here happening in front of you all today. So just in case you weren't aware, the exhibition that is around you at the moment, which is called 10 Years of the J. Irwin and Xenia S. Miller Prize, is a celebration of Exhibit Columbus. So today we're going to be speaking about Exhibit Columbus and Columbus, Indiana, but also a little bit about New Harmony and Indiana on the whole. This is the final day of this exhibit, so if you know anyone that should see it, please go get them and bring them here before 4:55 p.m. so they'll have enough time to look around. While you are here, I also want to invite you to go visit the exhibition as well that's in the VG project space. That is called Locality, and we have the curator right here as well. It's our senior gallery associate, Grant D'Amizio, so he can walk you through that exhibition as well. With that, I'm going to launch into some of the information around everyone seated in front of you here today. So directly to my left is Richard McCoy. Richard is the founding executive director of Landmark Columbus Foundation. He has a long history of creating unique solutions to complex cultural heritage challenges and occasionally writes about arts and culture. He received a BA in journalism and political science from Indiana University and holds an MA in art history with a specialization in conservation and restoration from the Institute of Fine Arts at New York University. So Marsh Davis has served as the president of Indiana Landmarks, the nation's largest statewide preservation organization. I did not know that. From 2006 to 2025. He holds multiple degrees in history from, Butler University and historic preservation, as well from Ball State University. He has served as a trustee of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the chair of Preservation Action, and as a board member of Partners for Sacred Places. Currently, he is a National Trust advisor and a board member of the Robert Lee Blackford Foundation, which is here in town. He was named a Sagamore of the Wabash by the Governor Frank O'Bannon, and in 2023, he received the Distinguished Alumni Award through Ball State University's College of Architecture and Planning. In 2025, he received the John H. Chaffee, I hope I'm saying that correctly, the John H. Chaffee Award, thank you, for outstanding achievement in public policy from the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the Eli Lilly Lifetime Achievement Award from the Indiana Historical Society. And he and his wife, Grace, have recently relocated here to New Harmony. So, as you may have already guessed, Richard is visiting us here from Columbus, Indiana, and both Marsh and also Connie are here in town in New Harmony. So now we get to you, Connie. Sorry for skipping ahead there. So Weinzapfel earns an MFA from Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville in 1981, after which she became the coordinator for the Chicago International Art Exposition, which is at the Navy Pier. In 1985, she returned to her native Posey County, and she became the director of the New Harmony Gallery of Contemporary Art, and she still serves on our board as well. I want to thank her for that service, for the University of Southern Indiana. In 1996, she then became the director of Historic New Harmony until her retirement in 2016, and at that time, she was honored with the title Director Emerita from USI, and was also named a Sagamore of the Wabash for her contributions to the state of Indiana and to New Harmony. She received the Lilly Lifetime Achievement Award from the Indiana Historical Society in 2020. Weinzapfel was proud to be elected the first female trustee of New Harmony's Working Men's Institute in 2023, and she now serves on the New Harmony Town Council. Thank you all for being here, and Richard, when you get your Sagamore on the Wabash, you let me know. I will add that to our YouTube listing, okay? Eventually, we'll get there. All right, so that being said, I had some topics for today, but this is more of a conversation, and if somebody wants to also chime in, feel free and ask any of your questions. And just before we launch in, I do want to note, as I mentioned very briefly, at 2 p.m. there's going to be an Owen McClure 200th anniversary presentation at the Working Men's Institute. If you're not sure where that is because you're here from out of town, half of this audience will be going there, so feel free to follow them over. It's about a block. With that, we'll launch in. So thank you for bearing with me for my introduction, and it's wonderful to have you here, Richard and Marsh and Connie. I thought we could start with a look into the cultural initiatives and historic preservation, because these are two aspects of, I would say, life here in New Harmony, which I can speak to, and it seems to be also very, very much part of Columbus, Indiana. So what do you feel like, and whoever wants to start, we have the mic here, what do you feel is important when it comes to arts and culture and also to design? How does that play a role within the community? And what about holding on to our historic heritage in terms of architecture and also design is important in Columbus, here in New Harmony, and just throughout Indiana as a whole?
I think you should do that.
Okay, this is, well, thank you. Thanks, Audra. Thanks for being here. We're awfully glad to have 10 years of our work on display in Columbus, Indiana, and you're seeing probably about 70 photographs, all of which were taken by that guy, Hadley Fruits, who's an extraordinary photographer. In each one of the panels, you'll see a picture at the bottom right, because that person wrote the text. And as I look at this, I'll answer your question, sorry. As I look at these photos, I think it's easy to look at the objects and the things that we created, and I want to talk maybe why we created those things. But when I look at them, I look at the people. I see my friends in there, I see people I knew at the time, and so I'm glad to be here with you, and particularly with two very distinguished Hoosiers, to talk about why place matters, and with Audra here in this space. And I am going to pay homage to J. Irwin and Xenia S. Miller and start with a quote that Mr. Miller talked about in 1994. It was an amazing moment in Columbus, Indiana, when it hosted the Pritzker Prize, which is sort of the Nobel Prize of architecture. It was an amazing thing to have this ceremony in Columbus, Indiana. And there was an exhibition as part of it, and Miller was talking about the idea that we all want to live in a good community. And we all have an understanding what a good community is. I think New Harmony is always aspired to be a good community for as many people as possible. But he also said a good community should look like a good community. And so when I think of your question, I think of that. And when you look, and this is an extraordinary place to be for this conversation, to talk about this, because you think about how New Harmony looks. If you look further down that way, you can see this landscape architecture rendition of the chapel that the Harmonists built. You see these buildings here, you're in this space. And so I think that how to answer your question is to think about how we represent good communities. And I think that is just as much to look at the past and to honor the past and to celebrate that, but that it has to be relevant to us today. And part of the thing that I think Exhibit Columbus does in the materiality and the things is they put new things in spaces that you may have been in 100 times. And that is a huge gift because it gives you the gift of curiosity, of exploration in places you may have been. And I think as we go on in life, this idea of going to a place that you've been to before and seeing it differently, or seeing a friend differently, seeing yourself differently, is a really valuable thing. And so I'm proud to be in this backdrop and proud to be here with you all to talk about that. So I think to really simplify it, a good community should look like a good community.
Well, one of the things that I've worked with Richard through the years, and what I see in these pictures, what he's been able to do is to engage the community. It's one thing to have an idea like what a good community should look like, but how do you build that consensus within the community? And that, I think, is the key where some communities succeed and some do not succeed. What I've seen in Columbus is a little bit different than your traditional historic preservation model, which would come in and you identify an area, you put a district on it, and then if you take it to the next level, you put restrictions, design guidelines, and rules and regulations. And not everybody likes that. But if you're able to build a preservation, what I call an ethos, by building engaging community like you see in all these pictures here, that is a good thing. And Columbus, I think, has succeeded there. I mean, I could name some other towns around Indiana where you have that, and I could name some where you don't, which I won't because it will offend. But when it happens, it's a good thing. Historic preservation is a big part of that, and when it's done well, especially by consensus, rules are needed in a lot of cases, but if you can do it without the regulatory burden, all the better. And when we have this idea that we're all in this for the good of the community, and then to somehow, it'll be interesting later in the conversation, you both have dealt with these issues, to nudge people to do what we call the right thing, like don't order up a building really badly. Because some people don't know. How do you build how do you educate people? Like what is the best approach to preserving that character that we try to say? That's my thoughts. And again, Columbus has done a remarkable job, Landmark Columbus, to I think build a consensus of good design that improves the quality of life.
It occurs to me as we're celebrating 200 years since Robert Owen and William McClure came to New Harmony to try their experiment, one of the tenets of Robert Owen's philosophy of making better communities was that the environment has a definite impact on how people behave and how they see themselves and how they treat other people. And I believe that. I've always believed that. And I think that that's one of the attractions of New Harmony is that all along the way, people have tried to make it more beautiful, more inviting, more interesting. And we still work on that today. Preservation plays into that, has always played into that. I think in the 70s when the big restoration push started, and even before that with Jane Owen, there was this idea of adaptive reuse. We're in an adapted building here. This was a mercantile, this was a store, and now it's a gallery. It has been a gallery for 50 years. So that idea of taking the historic building, taking something that's important, but making it useful for today has been an ethos here for a long time. And I think is one of the things that makes it possible to do different kinds of things here in New Harmony than a strict rule of preservation.
So I think that actually leads very well, thank you, the three of you, for your insights into the idea of the impact on the community. So we heard a little bit about the consensus building and sort of the reuse of, say, the architecture that's around us over time, and how that can influence the behaviors, which I really liked learning that. I hadn't heard that before. I would say specific to Exhibit Columbus, perhaps, as a starting point, what is the impact of something like the Miller Prize, both for the city of Columbus, but also for those who are involved in Exhibit Columbus? So sort of like looking at it two ways, how is the impact seen within the place where Exhibit Columbus is happening, but also what is the result for the actual winners of the Miller Prize themselves? And sort of on a broader scale, how do similar projects, say, across the state of Indiana, show signs of that impact as well? So starting within Columbus and then sort of moving out from there.
Okay, those are all really hard questions. But I'm going to do my best.
We've got 35 minutes.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to do my best to answer that and to try to pass this along. But I think Marsh and Connie have framed this up really well for me. And off your question is mentioning that the Owen McClure is 200th anniversary. This is the year of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And, it has me thinking in this longer term idea of what have been the values of the United States of America. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which were singular at that time. They're a little different today in the way we think about things. But then thinking about Owen and McClure and their values of the community. And then tracing that to Jane Blaffer Owen and thinking about her values. And I mention all these names to say that I think the way that the built environment works, whether you're paying attention to it or not, it becomes a physical manifestation of those values. And so I would bet in New Harmony, there is not a week that goes by that Jane Blaffer Owens is not quoted. I would assume she is quoted and brought up every day, every week. I would assume that her legacy is still here and present in some ways because the buildings are still here, her work is still here, and the values that she was putting in those works are manifest in that way. And so it feels like, in a way, she's still there. And I think you can trace that back to Owen and McClure, and you can even trace it back to the Harmonists and the way that they were trying to live and what they were doing is that in the end, that our communities become who we are. And as Marsh pointed out, some people do better or worse to represent those values and to pay attention to the past and care for that. But I think then if you look at the Miller Prize and why we created Exhibit Columbus and the Miller Prize, it was all about thinking about these values and what's next. So Columbus and New Harmony share a lot in common in that they had these iconic leaders. In Columbus, it was Irwin and Xenia. He passed in 2004, she passed in 2008, Jane passed in 2010. Very around the same time, and they both lived extraordinary lives and long lives. And so I think both communities have wondered, what do they do with this legacy? What do they do with these buildings that are imbued with these values, and how do they care for them? We also had this question, can we bring things back that are about what's next? And so this is why we created Exhibit. I'm going to take a long time. I'll try to wrap this up, I'm very sorry. The point being is, I think that in Columbus, Miller had an outweighing presence in creating the values of that town. In our town, there is not a week that goes by that Miller is not quoted. He is called Mr. Miller, even by people who have never met him. Oh, well, Mr. Miller, and it's this level, and Mrs. Miller, and like this level of dignity that they have in the town. And that's because I think their presence is still felt in the same way that the Owen McClure, Jane Blaffer Owens is still felt here. So what we wanted to do was to create something that honored that legacy and then made it spark to life in a short period of time. So you're seeing 10 years of Exhibit Columbus, 5 exhibitions. Each exhibition only lasts 3 months. And so we try to put things in place that are imbued with those same values, with designers that care about similar things, and then to give our community and visitors a chance to experience that. I think this keeps that legacy alive. It keeps it sparkling and vibrant in a community. And I think that it then gives those designers who come here and participate something to take home and something to move on in their career. At its best, artists are fickle people, as you know. And so it sometimes can be a challenge, but I think that at its best, it is the highest work we can do as humans, which is to think about values, think about beliefs, think about what matters to us at a deep level that's removed from capitalism or the economy or all of those things, and it's about place and people and art, which, I think that's really all there really is. Sorry, Marsh, I went on.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
You have a great response.
Go ahead.
Well, to go back to your question, maybe step back from Columbus a little bit, keeping the whole context in mind. But I think of, what the impact of these types of projects or program and good design, whether it's modern or historic. In a word, it creates places that people want to live. You look at the town towns around Indiana that have embraced design and preservation, those are the towns where people want to, and they have actually livable, it's a livable community, and there are many that are not. I think I'll give a couple of examples. Carmel, when I was a kid, it was hit by one blinking light like we have here in the Army, and Carmel is now a major city. But the longtime mayor, Jim Brainerd, embraced the idea of new urbanism and many other things, and focused on design. Now, not all is good, and he would admit that, but there was a great focus on that. Not to say that people wouldn't move there anyway as a bedroom suburb, but it has a quality about it that you don't find in many of those other suburbs because of his vision largely. I think of Wabash. Anybody been to Wabash? Maybe, Richard Ford was the great philanthropist there related to the Ford Gearbox Company. Wabash was a pretty scrappy town, and in downtown Wabash there was a tenement. It was an old hotel that was one of the most deplorable living conditions you can imagine. Well, Richard bought that and did a historic preservation tax credit project. And it's now the Charlie Creek Inn, which is like the hub of the community. And it's really transformed that downtown and is drawing people to that community that wouldn't otherwise go there. There are other examples I could give, but it's whether it's through really good historic preservation and creating a good design or modern design that is not a low common denominator. These are the places that people want to live. And all kinds of studies. There's a famous preservation economist named Don Ripkema, place economics, and look that up. I mean, all the statistics. He looks at the values of the life, quality of life in historic districts versus those that are not. And by every measure, it's a positive mark. So it's not just, warm and fuzzy feel-good stuff. There's hard data to support the contributions to quality of life, the good preservation, and art and design can bring.
Well, it's interesting that, particularly right now in New Harmony, a lot of us are kind of grappling with the idea of what is the next wave of growth? What is the next phase? What is the consensus? I have been privileged to work on the last two comprehensive plans for the town. So when I was at Historic New Harmony, I kind of managed that process. This was like 2007, 2008, and we just finished last year the update of that plan. We have a couple of things happening here. Of course, Historic New Harmony has gotten a lot of Lilly money, and they're going to be developing some new things here in town, right across the street here in Church Park. That will involve some community input, and it'll give the opportunity to bring some designers from outside, and that's going to change this town, I think, in a very positive way. The other thing that's happening is where the New Harmony School was on the south end of town, that is owned by some developers, and we are trying to figure out what are the needs of the town. Is there a consensus about where we want to go? That was addressed in the comprehensive plan, but when you get right down to it, what is that going to look like, and what is the long-term impact on New Harmony? So design, when there's money available, you have to get right down to it and figure out what is the best thing for the next iteration of this place.
I mean, I have so much to think about with those responses. So we can either, if you want to make this into more of a conversation and respond to one another regarding impact, or we could move on to one of the other themes. But I'm happy to talk about something that I wanted to hear more about was this idea of the inside versus outside. Is that something that you think is worth reflecting on for the middle of this? So for Exhibit Columbus, one thing that happens is when you have the presentations outside and everything is up for those 3 months, you have a lot of outsiders who want to come and see those projects. I know many of you who here has been to see Exhibit Columbus? I cannot raise my hand, but I know several of you have. Do you feel like there is a stronger sense of what actually I would say, what makes Columbus have an identity through Exhibit Columbus, through those, through the visitors seeing the projects, through the residents seeing the projects. Do you feel like it helps to shape the identity of the city? Do you feel like, I'm really trying to frame this in a way that is, how do you feel about the inside versus outside when you have a lot of visitors here? For example, in New Harmony, it's a small town. So when we get a lot of visitors, it can really change the overall dynamic of the town. So if you want to speak to visitors to Columbus for Exhibit Columbus, feedback from them, how it helps you see Exhibit Columbus maybe differently, and then also folks on the inside, the residents of town, how did they respond to Exhibit Columbus? And I'm also trying to think about New Harmony in that, but because it's so much smaller than Columbus, I guess we can sort of reflect on the inside and outside of it a little differently.
Yeah, sure. It's a tough question. Let me see if I can break it down in this way, is that, and really with Marsh and Connie's good thoughts about place and adaptive reuse and how we think about these things. I think communities have different kinds of places. And so we have public places and we have private places. And we have places that are never activated, but we go to. And there are places that we only go to when they're activated. My example here in New Harmony would be the Labyrinth over here. The activation is to go experience it. There's probably never music there. You go, the place is the experience unto itself. But then when I think it's McClure Park here, you're probably more likely to go there only when there's a band or there's an event. It's a place that has activities. And then there's kind of a third place, especially in New Harmony, which is there are places that are especially for visitors and for tourists. And so if you start to think about other cities in America, think about what is a real place, like in New Orleans. Like, is Bourbon Street a real place? Or is that kind of a fiction of a place that's for tourists? If you think of Times Square in New York, if you think of, I don't know, name your city and that place that you know the locals don't go to, but the tourists go to. And then it's activated in that way. And so these are like, if I think about places in that way and how you start to think about what makes a good place, it's for whom? You know, is it for you to go by yourself and experience? Is it for you to go with other people in your community? Or is it for others to come to in their community? So that I want to like first set that frame to think about what is inside and what is outside. And then when you start to say, well, let's invite people to come think about our places. Who should those people be that either create our places that are inactive or active or tourist-based? Again, we'll go to New Harmony. Ken Schutte was an outsider when he created the Labyrinth for Jane Blaffer Owen just over here. Am I characterizing you in a fair way where you were not here? He can't hear so well. He was a professor at Purdue and living in Lafayette, so I know he was kind of an outsider. So he was an outsider, but whereas like with McClure Park, that structure was made locally, right? The band shell. Is that McClure Park? Am I thinking of the right one?
That's right.
Yeah. So it's more of a local place.
Oh, in a way, yeah. I mean, that was during the Big Lily Money days. That was in the 70s. That was recreated from a historic photograph. Yeah.
Interesting. So I think it's interesting why and when a community looks for outside voices to come in, whereas when a community has within itself an ability to make places either programmed or unprogrammed or for tourists. And why they're doing, is this resonating with you? I'm going to be quiet.
Well, I was just going to say that it's interesting the way you frame this, because if you would ask people that are multi-generational New Harmony people about the 70s, when, again, a giant pot of Lily money came into town, They would say it was
areas.
all
Yeah.
outside. It was all outside influence. I think to the great benefit of the town that we live in today, but it depends on who's asking. You know, it depends on who's thinking about it, what the inside and the outside.
Does it, you take it back, I want to see if you'll answer this.
We have a town council member here, so we're gonna get.
Well, Connie, I would just say is that, like, so there's two questions I have for that. One is, do people today feel like it's of and from New Harmony, that it was built in the 70s? Is there an ownership of it now, or does it still feel applied? And then the second part of that question is, well, let's just leave it at that first part.
Well, I would say that it's certainly more thought of as part of us, you know, part of the us of New Harmony. But I believe that's because there are many more people who have moved here from other places.
Yeah.
So the balance of, it, you know, it's characterized like in Bloomington, it's called town and gown. But the balance is changing all the time. And the experience of most of the people that are here is a little different than it was 50 years ago. So it's evolving, I would say.
Just add back to kind of the initial question about the people who come to Columbus or the exhibit Columbus. That was a very intentional act on your part to attract people who are interested in design and art.
Yeah.
You know, there is and New Harmony has its tourism base, but it's the beauty of it to me is it's not overrun, and we still attract a lot of big thinkers. We call them thought leaders, you included, to the town. And there's another small tourist town a little bit to the west of Columbus. Well, I didn't say it, but it's just, you go to a day like this, the streets are going to be clogged, the t-shirts and butt shops are everywhere, motorcycles, there's bumper to bumper traffic getting into town. New Harmony, fortunately, has avoided that. I think by the kind of people that are attracted to come here, and a lot of it is because of the historic character and the arts and design. Ken Schutte always says, keep it small but excellent.
Yeah.
And did you want to say something?
Well, could I make a point?
No,
Yeah.
What's interesting about Columbus and New Harmony is they don't have physical university in the arts. We are associated with USI, which has facilities here. So both communities are universities without walls. And education is going on with this event, which takes an historic building and does something extraordinary with it, or on it, or by it, and so it's an educational thing. And I think Miller really thought and really believed in economics, but he saw design as a key to anchoring the right kind of growth. That factory on the outside of town where you park on the roof and the whole outside of the factory is glass windows, so all the people working are in the woods. I mean, that's an amazing building. And we have that kind of thing here. So, but back to Connie's point on it, we don't want urban sprawl, but we don't want increased density. So what do? And as Marsh mentioned, how do you achieve excellence and remain small?
I think it's the kind of people that we do intentionally attract here. Ken and I will serve on the Robert Lee Blaffer Foundation board, and one of our goals in growing the programs of that foundation is to increase the presence of national and international thought leaders here in Columbus on a regular basis, and to attract audiences who might be interested in interacting with those people. That is the kind of intentionality that we're striving to. It's not going to attract the t-shirt shops, which is good. A couple of us at the Blackford Foundation met with one of the leading philanthropist in Indiana, and he asked the question, well, what are you doing in New Harmony to attract more people? And I was a little mystified by that. It's not so much, I hate to say it, that sounds snobbish, but quality over quantity, and that's what we're looking for. And I don't mean it in the derogatory way.
We also are not trying to in any way be rude to the big thinkers who like to buy their t-shirts and eat their fudge. So I just wanted to clarify that point. We have a question in the back. I'm happy to open it up. We can have kind of a conversation. We are going to put this on YouTube, so if you can shout.
Okay.
Do you mind? Okay.
Richard raised some interesting questions. There are no local people in this room right now. Janet Lawrence has lived here the longest. When did you move here, Janet?
78.
1978. We moved here in 2001.
Well, there's some Coast County people here.
But there is a historic event was the last election. Think about it. Connie knows that the local people were outvoted in the last town board election, to be right to the point. So that is an evolution during the 25 years we have lived here, that as of the last election, the people that moved to New Harmony for the reasons that Marsh is describing were the majority of the voters on election day.
Well, it's kind of a wave. It's kind of a wave, and I would say it's been a wave for 200 years. We had the harmonists, then we had the, very radical Owen community. And that kind of stayed on, and then in the second half of the 19th century, it subsided, and it became a mercantile town and a farming town. And so there are waves of that. There in the early 2000s, a bunch of people that moved to New Harmony were elected to the town board. So it's an evolution. It's an evolution. What and this might be Pollyanna, it shouldn't be, but when I approach getting consensus through the comp plan, those kinds of exercises, I think it's very important to get people from all segments of the town, because we all live here, we all pay taxes here, we all care that the main cafe is going to close, whether we go there or not. We care about these things because they support the life of the town. So, I really believe in consensus. I think there's room for everybody. What is fascinating to me is the kinds of people that have moved here in the last 5 to 10 years. These are not people that are historians or artists, these are people that have lived in other big places. California, Colorado, Oklahoma. I mean, lots of different places. But they came here for some reason at some time, and they're here, and they're investing in this place. It's an amazing place.
I'm trying to respond back to the original question you had and tie this in a little bit. But so what's interesting is that if I have my chronology correct, it's really in the 60s and 70s that Jane is really active here. And she's honestly trying to create a much more tourist-focused town. She's trying to make this a place where people would come. I mean, this is why the inn is built. This is why the Barn Abbey is built. This is why there's a tourism visitor center. It's dramatically shifting who this town is for in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And she's literally moving buildings around to make it more dense so it's better for tourism. So cities move slow, but this is a pretty fast move that the city goes through, that it's clearly changing its intentions away from this idea that we're doing something for us, but it's really for you. And so this inside and out that's happening.
Well, I was just going to say small businesses also, as we know, benefit from those activities.
Sure. It's a classic strategy, but then you have to think about what was the climate in America in the 60s and 70s. Cities were, this is the time when you have in New York City brownouts. You have huge white flight in cities. The cities are dramatically changing, so this city changes. You see a similar change in Columbus, but it never really focuses on the tourism. It continues to always focus on civic life, on the idea of education, of government, of parks, and these sort of things.
it grows a tourism component, but then similarly, you mentioned in 2000, like you have a different rise in America where you have a creative class that suddenly has the ability to kind of work wherever they want. And then cities start designing their places so that they can attract people to come from wherever. You can work remotely, and the pandemic just puts the gas pedal down on this. And in large part, Indiana loses in this game. The quality of place here does not compete with North Carolina or maybe Bentonville or Northwest Arkansas. There's, that to me is a hard truth of Indiana. Like it had a little bit of spike during the pandemic, but the rural communities in particular are starting to decline again. Indianapolis is growing at the cost of the rest of the state, and you can frame it that way. I don't know. In any case, my point is that I think today where cities are at and where New Harmony is at, they're trying to make great places for the people that live here. And so it's a little different from this tourist attraction for economic development or workforce attraction to try to attract people here. I think you're seeing like a different shift where people are saying, let's build a community where people that grew up here want to stay here. I don't know if that's true, but like to me, when I talk to colleagues around the country, this is the idea. Instead of improving your place for tourists or for people that don't live here, how can you improve your place for the people that live here? You see this parallel in a different way, the way Airbnb, and you see it really dramatically here. People want to come here and experience this town as if they're a resident. I think there are just as many hotel rooms and Airbnb here as there are at the inn. That is a huge shift, and I would imagine it's something that Jane Blackford never imagined when she built the New Harmony Inn. It was that kind of visitor, that kind of attitude that when you think about when you guys go on vacation, how often do you stay at a house versus a hotel? Is we want to have these experiences where we feel like we are part of a place. And so I think New Harmony is actually really well positioned to enjoy that.
I think that takes us back as well to this idea of staying in a historic home and preservation of that home.
Yeah.
It follows really the evolution of the historic preservation movement. So this town, the preservation here was probably conceived as a tourist-driven. I heard that there was even a McDonald's plan for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's so bad.
So, but and we should be grateful that, not that it failed, but it took a different direction. You think of the places like Williamsburg, that was kind of a model of preservation. In Indianapolis, you had, there was where the James Whitcomb Riley home is, Lockerbie Square, where there was a theme park being planned by the leading preservationists in the community called Lockerbie Fair. And it was going to be, I mean, today it would be just cheesy as could be, but that was the way people thought then. And then you had the movement of taking people back to the urban neighborhoods. Historic places no longer just something to visit, but people want to live in and to interact with. I think, so this town really falls right into the evolution of the preservation movement.
I think we can open up to questions because we're getting sort of to the end of the hour. And just to reiterate, we do hope that you will head over to the Working Men's Institute to show some love to the Odin Clerk 200. But we have a question.
Earlier you mentioned where you were talking about how like a sudden influx of like things like funding and people, just the kind of thought of outsider influence being such a significant, I guess, force at New Harmony at one point, and it slowly became less and less of an outside force and more so an ingrained part of New Harmony's identity. In a time where, especially nowadays, with the death of third spaces, places where young people can't really meet and foster community, from what I've heard you guys talk about, one of the main important factors to all of this, one of the main intentions, is the seeking out community and fostering community. Community is like the thing. And you guys are also talking about people want to come here and kind of see what it feels like to live as a resident here. It's that sort of desire for community, a longing for it. How would you guys consider that sort of desire for community to affect your own lives, especially in reference to I don't know why I'm blanking on it, the like landmark Columbus things, and also like New Harmony as a whole? How would you say your own desire for community has affected your experiences through that?
Yeah, so I can go. Thank you for a very insightful and interesting question. Will you tell me your name?
Oh, I'm Flo.
Hey, Flo. Thank you. You get right to the heart of it, which is to say, to the heart of what we think about in Landmark Columbus Foundation and the reasons why we're creating Exhibit Columbus. And it's because I think that the public realm, or we think that the public realm, the spaces that we share together and in a way that we fund together through our taxes, should be the places in our community where we are expecting the most out of art and design. We should not be racing to the bottom to find the cheapest, fastest solution. We should be trying to find solutions for our public spaces that are great for as many people as possible. I'm not going to say everyone because it's really hard, but I think in today's world, and to push back a little bit on the question about youth, is that I think today's youth are really challenged, having grown up during a deep digital age and a horrific pandemic, and so that there is an enormous sense of isolation and individualism that is not able to sort of manifest itself in a sense of growing community. You see this in the decimation of public service groups and religion and all these different places where you normally build community. And so besides that kind of negative perspective I'm giving you, I believe that our public spaces, our civic spaces, are what we need to double down on today to invite more people in there, and that it's a town's responsibility to try to make and to program the public spaces. Make a calendar, and every quarter are you programming something for as many communities in your community to be there? Is there something for young people to do? Is there something for older people to do? Are all of your communities, do they feel like their public spaces are there? And I think it's those cities and those communities that are doing that are building community, will be the ones that are desirable not only to live in, but also to Airbnb in.
And I just want to throw in a word here, because it feels like what you're saying is, like sort of across the board, what I'm hearing is that folks want to live with intention and in spaces that have intention for them to be able to enjoy their lives. You can get all of it. Do we have another question? That was a really great question.
I give a quick follow-up,
Go ahead.
and this is a good follow-up, Connie. The day after Mrs. Owen died, Tammy and I were taking a walk, and a man who's a local Posey County family with deep, deep roots in Posey County was on the town board. He stopped and said, "You can't go anywhere in this town and see the footprint of Mrs. Owen."
Yeah.
And that was a really, I thought, a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Well, I think with that, I don't want anyone to be late, even on the panel, to the 2 p.m. talk. So we're going to adjourn. Please do have some snacks and treats and stick around and have some conversation and enjoy the talk at the Working Men's Institute.